Hariharan Krishnan, Director, Media Lab, Professor of Practice, Literature and the Arts at Kriya University in today's Kriya Engage series. He's a national award winning filmmaker and a well-known personality in the field of music, painting and dance. In a span of 37 years, he has produced and directed over 350 short films, documentaries and TV serials on subjects ranging from tourism to the Tamil Bhakti poets. His passion for teaching and conducting workshops has taken him from the Film Institute in Pune to the University of Pennsylvania, USA. He taught courses on Indian cinema and society. Presently, interestingly, he is completing a film on the life of Kamal Hassan titled Citizen K. He started objective in joining Kriya University is to lead the younger generation to harness the power of creative arts, communication, one's thoughts and feelings through a variety of media. So today we have Professor Hari here, and we are going to discuss how do art technology and new media impact modern day education. Surrounded by so much of information and social media, there is an urgent need to help students to negotiate the traditional academic systems and to understand how to use the technology to their best. So let's discover how liberal arts develops change makers for tomorrow. Professor Hariharan, I welcome you and over to you.
Good evening, everybody. It's indeed a great pleasure to be with all of you in so many parts of the country, and how I wish I could see all of you, personally, face to face. However, I have a small little request. When I'm going to be doing some of the slides, I will be asking you some questions, and I will need you to quickly go into the chat box and give me your answers. I'll give you 5 seconds to 7 seconds, and you have to quickly tell me what is this. Okay, let's see if it works. But that's how we have to always take adventurous leaps when we do combine art, technology, and new media. So as Miss Meenu told you that I've been a professional film director for over 35 years, and I have made 9 feature films and worked with fantastic people like Om Puri, Deepthi Nawal, my good friends like Rahman and Kamal Hassan. They all worked together, and it's such a great pleasure to enter into the world of academics and share this experience of how I have seen art, technology, and new media. So let's go with the first slide. I'm starting with the first question. What is art? Okay. Now, what you're seeing on this screen is a natural system where there is sea waves coming in, and there is sand. Now, that is nature. Art is when you build a sand castle out of that. That sand castle which you see on the beach is not natural. It has been constructed by an individual. So, art is anything in which there is an intervention by a human being, a society, or a collective to create something new. Next slide. Now you see here you have a big mountain, and that mountain you can see is sculpted at the Ellora Caves. How did this person see a temple in this mountain? That requires great art, a great amount of visualization, a great amount of understanding of the material there, and how you can sculpt a mountain into a temple. The mountain is natural, the temple is in fact artificial. And the word art comes from the word artificial. Next slide. And the next slide. Now here you have beautiful waterfalls, completely natural. And then next slide. Here it is. The same water, when it is used like a fountain, you will see it is something else. So what are we seeing today? We are seeing that education today provides subject information as a discipline with the ways of analyzing it and resulting in various forms of assessment. So what are we doing? When we go to a school, we get information as a discipline, we analyze it, and we get assessed for it. Next slide. Okay, next slide. Easily, there's another insert that will come now. Now you see, we sit in classrooms. Next insert, we come out with grades. Okay, we celebrate when we get our certificates and we say, yeah, 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 yeah. Now, this is the process that we have seen all our lives. In every school, every college, this is what happens. You come into a school, you sit in classrooms, and you get your certificates. What are we looking at? Next slide. Next. So I'm asking a simple question. Where is art in all this? Where was art? You went into this door and you came out like this. Where was art in all this? How do we use art? Now let me show you another slide. Next slide, please. Now we have 4 personalities here. Okay, I would like to ask any one of you to guess who these 4 personalities are. I'm giving you 10 seconds. Can you name even one of them? Okay, these are all very, very eminent people with whom we have all studied in our schools. We have all passed our exams with these people, but most of us would have forgotten these people. So on the extreme left is Akbar. Very good. Newton, Mona Lisa, Shastriji. That is not Shastriji, by the way. That is Dr. Rajendra Prasad. Very good. I'm so happy. You got so many people correctly saying. Now, who is this one man in black and white dress? Who is that man? He was Louis Pasteur, the man who gave us pasteurized milk, and we are all alive because of Louis Pasteur. But then, for many who don't know these people's face, I'll give you the next slide. Now, here is one gentleman with whom all of us know. This is Hrithik Roshan playing Akbar. And now everybody will understand this. Oh, this is how Akbar looked. Akbar actually possibly looked like the guy on the left. But we saw in a movie like this. So a cinematic form actually helps art. Art helps comprehension. So what did I do here actually? I saw all these real, this is the text, but the moment I provide a context to it, you are able to understand. Now, most of us who have seen Jodha Akbar would never forget Akbar because there was a context, an emotional context given to a very complex story. So most institutions test levels of information retention. But what happens to comprehension? Do we remember all this after our exams? Most of us, we forget. The question is, art has to play a very, very important role in memory. How do we carry this? Otherwise, what was the point spending so many years in schools and universities if you don't come out remembering all this? Now, you see, comprehension is a creative force that builds up the student's personality, knowledge, and capability of handling complex situations. That is what comprehension. It's a creative force. So look at this, the greatest scientist ever. Albert Einstein was a fabulous violinist. This is Mr. Anand Mahindra. He went and studied film direction at UCLA. And after doing film direction, he comes to head one of the biggest companies in India. Creative forces. Next slide. This is Shankar Mahadevan. Shankar Mahadevan was a software engineer, but all the time he was also pursuing music. So definitely all that he learned as a software engineer did help in emboldening him to become a great singer, a great music director, and a wonderful entertainer. But I'll show you one person who's very, very unique. All of us know her. Who is that person? Next slide. The Prime Minister of India, ex-Prime Minister Indira Gandhi. Indira Gandhi was a student at Oxford. She studied economics and she was a linguist. She could speak French, she could speak Hindi, Urdu, Persian. She learned from her father. And because of her multilingual capabilities, she was a very creative person. Very, very creative person who could be the first woman Prime Minister of our country and lead us forward. Next slide. So what is the role of art in education? I would like to refer to a wonderful book. If you could read this person in person, it will be great. But it's a great education. This guy called Howard Gardner. So he said theory of multiple intelligence. He said that each student must be endowed with, next slide, linguistic intelligence. What is linguistic intelligence? Rhetorical strength, patterns to retain ideas, and annotating ideas across disciplines. So he came with a wide set of that. linguistic intelligence. It is not just about learning a language like Mrs. Gandhi did, but use the rhetorical strength. Make patterns out of these words. Annotate ideas across disciplines and see how you can connect music with poetry, music with physics, music with all that is linguistic intelligence. You learn something with words, but you manage to connect it. Next slide. Logical and mathematical intelligence. So it moves from numbers and objects to visualization and action in abstract manner. How are we going to study algebra and geometry and trigonometry and algorithms if we are not able to visualize it? If we just see it as numbers, we may remember it just to write an exam and pass out. But to get the real impact, you need to go beyond it. You need to visualize it. And I'll show you one fantastic person, next slide, who made this difference. This brilliant man called Turing. Turing was a very great visualizer. He was given the task of breaking down German codes, which were coming into America, to England during the Second World War. So he was the man who decided, why can't I see these as patterns? And he created patterns, and he actually ended up creating the first computer in the world. He did not go with that objective, but he was basically trying to break these codes. So for me, education is about breaking these codes there. What kind of codes are you getting, and how are you breaking it down to create more visualization? Next slide. You have Rabindranath Tagore. He never went to school at all. He was house schooled, but a great thinker, a great poet. He could connect with the people. So he said that everything comes to us that belongs to us if we create the capacity to receive it. So how do we create that capacity? Just going to school and expecting the teacher to create it is not possible. You got to put in your creativity, and that is art. Next slide. Shreya Ghoshal, a very ordinary student. She went to college, she did her graduation, and then she just pursued music. And what a wonderful singer she is. A great nuanced singer. She sings like a classical singer, but she never trained herself in the kind of classical ways that others did, but a great singer. So what I'm trying to say is that it's about these three. How do we combine linguistic and logical and mathematical intelligence to achieve what we want? Intelligence is something we need to build up as students. Next slide. Now I'm giving you some more intelligences which Howard Gardner prescribed. Next slide. It's called musical intelligence. To understand thought as extended gesture, connecting with kinesthetic intelligence, integrating one's body. So if you want to be a good student, please learn music. Please learn some amount of dance. Use your body language. Your body language is very important. Once you understand your own body, the way your body uses space, then you come into spatial intelligence. You know, it is so beautiful to see your mother cook. How does she understand how much is required for this and how much she never uses spoons, but she has a spatial intelligence, and how she uses that spatial intelligence to create. And last but not the least, you should have ethico-moral intelligence. I'm combining a lot of Howard Gardner's principles, but trying to say this is the last and very, very important thing. When we study something in school and colleges, how do we use this very sophisticated discretion in actions? How do we help the society around us? How do we see that whatever I am studying today must benefit the people of tomorrow? Otherwise, it's of no use. Let me show you a slide here. Next slide, please. Now look at, this is one fantastic painting, by the very famous Godel Bach. This guy, he decided, you can see, are the stairs going up, down, sideways, left, up, down? But the world around us is like this. It has multiple directions it moves in. Are we able to see all these multiple directions in one go? Or do we see one direction at one time? So the importance is to train our mind to see multiple directions. And once we see multiple directions, we see multiple contexts. Like, for example, does the poverty of India mean anything to us? Do we want to say, yes, we need to do something and do that correctly? And look at every time you study, are you feeling that I should do something for these people? Whatever am I studying here? Will it benefit them in some way or the other? It might not be just going and sending a donation check. That's not the point. The point is to keep that ethico-moral intelligence. that even if I'm studying physics, even if I'm studying music, can I help these people out, come out of their poverty, come out of their deprivation? That should be a constant reminder to us. This ethical moral intelligence is a very, very important concern in art. That is probably a very great artistic activity. It must go on in all our minds. Next slide. So, all the above concepts of intelligence help the students create new ideas and concepts in the following creative ways. I'm showing you three creative ways, which are very, very important for all of us to understand. The first is called translation. In this creative way, you help connect thought processes of one discipline with another in simple elementary ways. For example, you come to a class and somebody is teaching you English language, and the teacher actually teaches you the text, say Shakespeare or Rabindranath Tagore's poems, and she explains to you. She's translating it, the meaning to you. That is one. Or if you are Hindi speaking, she might translate it from English to Hindi for you. Now that is helping connect thought processes of one discipline with another in simple elementary ways. Next slide. What is the next step we take? Transformation. Here, the individual disconnects the root process of one form and recreates it in another different form. For example, I read a story and I visualize the story into a film. The person who wrote that text never had this film in mind. Or somebody composes music for an orchestra, but I take that music piece and I put it to some other visual. I transform it. I give it a different form. And the third one is even more interesting, most challenging. It's called transcreation. And that is, this process involves disruption, where one creative thought process only alludes to another. It doesn't transform, but it disrupts it and becomes something else altogether. Something else. And you really wonder, was it this that I did? It disruptive. Now, let me show you some examples of these three. Next slide, please. I'll take a very basic example for all of you is the text. Next slide is a very famous text by Shakespeare called Othello. Okay, Othello, everybody knows Othello is a very great. Now, that is translated into Russian. So, a Russian publication of Shakespeare is also available. But then that is transformed. Next slide. Now, okay, so we have Kozintsev's films on Shakespeare. He made Russian films of Shakespearean subjects. Now you have an American director making Othello. His name is Orson Welles. But he was a white man and he did Othello. Next slide. Okay, so now from there we come into a Hindi film. Yeah, a Hindi film called Omkara. So Othello travels all the way from Shakespeare and comes through and then comes into an Assamese film. Now, this is almost coming to the level of transcreation, a contemporary Assamese film. But then this is even more fascinating when I show you the next slide. Next slide. Now you see here a Kathakali performance is happening of Shakespeare. And that it is nowhere near Kathakali. There is another dancer who's in a different costume altogether. Now this is where I find it is almost entering into the realm of transcreation. I don't think Shakespeare would have ever visualized that one day his play would be performed by a Kathakali dancer who has in fact completely changed their costume. And then the last one is virtually a joke. This is a game called Othello. Just because it has got black and white, he called it Othello. Now, this is completely to a different level. Now, what I'm trying to say, what started off as Othello, as one story written by Shakespeare 400 years ago, becomes completely different by now. So translation, transformation, transcreation. Next slide. So now we are coming into the realm of technology. We are in the era of education 4.0. What does it mean? Next slide. Industry and modern education have always gone hand in hand. Technology in industry and education 4.0 has brought us to the realm of artificial intelligence and machine learning. Now, this is where technology is already brought in, but we are still in the realm of old electricity. We are still suffering from electricity problems. When are we come into artificial intelligence and machine learning? How young generation, we've already started using it, but now it should enter into our classrooms. Next slide. The 21st century student is bombarded today in the world of advanced audiovisual technology. But in the class, he is loaded with verbal representations. You are just listening to words, words, and words. You are not moving away from the words. Loaded with readings and writing assignments as the primary text, there seems to be no ambition to adopt cellular technology, interactive digital applications, and robotics. That is education 4.0. I mean, it cannot happen today, but we should all be ready to embrace it as quickly as it comes. And we should be ready for that. All, both the students and the universities should move into interactive digital applications and robotics. Next, let me give you an example. Next. So most Indians have willingly adapted to modern technological aids for communications, and the students completely. Let's see some good uses. How can we put technology into robust use? Look at this classroom now. Now imagine if we are all seated around with laptops, cell phones, calculators, and we do our own work. And the professor comes, next slide. When you see a professor into a classroom, next slide. The professor on the right hand side, you see, is just a facilitator. She or he simply comes and facilitates you, guides you through what we call as immersive reality, as you see here. Next slide. Now look at this classroom. I think this is the future of education, where all of us wear headsets. This is a simple Google Cardboard on the left-hand side, and there it is, a VR headset. In VR headset, imagine loaded entirely with all your information, classroom, textbooks, everything is loaded into this. And you read it, you watch it, you learn it, you hear it, you dance with it at your own pace. You do it at your own pace. You should be able to grasp all the information in the world at your own pace, and then see how you can start applying it. Next slide. See how you can start applying this. It's fascinating how the world starts moving now. Here, with your hand, you can actually start moving things. This is called haptic technology. So you can actually feel, you can actually do things with your fingers. You don't have to write anything more. You can mix chemicals with your fingers, with software loaded already onto that. Next slide. Or kids are sitting there and looking at a whole lot of studies. Now you can actually apply various grasp forces. Imagine sitting in a classroom and doing physics and chemistry like this. You don't have to go to a lab, but learn it like this. Learn it like this. Once you learn it like this, you can jump into the next generation much easier. Next slide. Now here is a person. Now look at the most advanced piece of usages today. People who have got, without hands can actually start stimulating their muscles, amputated muscles, back into action, thanks to the new technology available today. This is the level that we are reaching today. How quickly can our schools and universities move towards adapting these technologies? Next slide. So now look at a very simple thing. I don't have to go too far. There is a new media. What is the new media? It's a talking phone. Next. One by one, put it back. It's a movie camera, it's a sound recorder, it's a memory notebook, it's a portable computer, it's an alarm clock, it's a GPS, it's a portable bank, it's a health monitor, it's an entertainment portal, it's a surveillance network. Educational aid, why don't we use this in the classrooms? Why don't we bring all our textbooks here? All that we learned can be actually handled by this new media, a single mobile phone. Now we need to get this application. And see, we are already doing so many things. Once upon a time, when I was growing up as a young student, all these 11 items were independent things. There was a phone that was separate, a camera was separate, the sound recorder, the notebook, the script, the alarm clock, the GPS, everything was separate. We had maps guiding us when we were going. Today I can do my banking operations from my phone. I can take care of my health. My doctor will know that my BP is going up or not, thanks to a health monitor. It's an entertainment portal. All of us watch movies, games, everything on this, and it's also surveillance network. You can not only yourself, you can also find out where your friends are. You can actually track them. Now there are plus and minuses to all this, but we have to use it judicially, and that is why Howard Gardner's ethico-moral intelligence comes in. We cannot say we should not use all this. We should use it, but for our own benefit. Next slide. So the role of new media for me is very simple. Next slide. Is about convergence. How do we converge everything into one place? Next. Students should learn and comprehend from multiple sources. How can education play the role of a facilitator for these diverse channels? How can I, as a professor, come to the classroom and just be a facilitator? I should believe that the school should now reach to each student's home. All of you must realize at this moment that we in India have almost 100 million children. 100 million, between 10 crores of them don't actually get proper schooling, out of which 3.5 crores don't go to schools at all. Should we not have that fundamental ethics in us to say, my God, 10 crores, they don't go to education? How are we, as good modern students, help them out? That's also part of our agenda. As we are going to handle new media, we should see how we can take schools to students' homes. Next. One way is to invoke the Gardner's theories of multiple intelligence and reshape our curriculum to help students discover their own unique and individualized pathways to knowledge and its comprehension. Every student must now take on the responsibility of saying, I am going to develop my curriculum. I'm going to do something exactly what I want to do because I have very little time. The world has to go through drastic changes today. And especially today, with this pandemic, it is now doubling our responsibilities to do something very crucial to change the world around us. Next slide. So the role of new media is to make sure that interwovenness happens. Now, at Kriya University, we call ourselves the School of Interwoven Arts and Sciences. And that has to be, I'm not saying that we have the solutions for it, but we got to start making it happen. The Media Lab, where I am working with my friend Anton, is taking the first baby steps to make immersive education a real possibility. So at Kriya, we already have all the facilities in our lab to create virtual reality and augmented reality products. So we can convert history lectures, literature lectures, all of them can be transformed into a headset and immerse yourself. And that way you learn it much better. Next slide. So the university must work towards redesigning its curriculum. It will not only empower the students to face the new and unpredictable world, but also influence the higher bodies and their own academic means to make this change happen. I think why I am very passionate about this is that I said this is the right opportune moment for all of us as student, as faculty, parents, all of us who are concerned audiences today. We must think of redesigning our curriculum. Our curriculum is still based for the old world colonial system, where you are just to come to learn by heart something and go out. So one of the things that we tell in our university is that you come here with an open mind. If you want to change the world, you cannot come into a university thinking, I'm going to be a physicist, I'm going to be an economist, I'm going to be a psychologist. Don't narrow yourself. Please don't put these blinkers and come into university, because that's what many schools have done. But when you come to university, throw those blinkers out and say, I am going to do what I think I am capable of doing best. So our motto is to get good students, to make them better so that they can deliver the best. You have to go out and deliver the best that you can. But if you come to a university to say, I want only this, I don't want to learn that, then I don't think you should go to university at all. I think you just have to hit Google and you get all the information that you want. If you want to transform it into knowledge and intelligence, you must redesign yourself. You redesign yourself and then you redesign your curriculum. And only then you can face the unpredictable world. One of our mottos at Kriya University is very strongly written that we must be ready to face a new unpredictable world. And that's what we should all be ready for. And if we are not willing to put that determined step forward to make that change happen, then I think we are really letting our own citizens down. I think whom I am talking to, we are all rather privileged people today that we can actually sit in front of a laptop like this with uninterrupted power system, with cool rooms. This is not possible for 99% of our citizens. How are we going to change their lives? If you decide that is my primary goal, I'm sure any university, you join Kriya University or any university, you will be a great citizen. Thank you so much. I'm open to questions now, please. You can put up your chat messages here.
Thank you so much, Professor Hariharan. That was a fantastic talk, and it was such a treat to me being a counseling psychologist. I was really happy to listen to Gardner's theory and how beautifully you just weaved the intelligence theory, multiple intelligence theory with technology, with education. And to some extent, I totally agree with you that yes, when students enter the school, I think the education system is made in such a way, although our national policy of education does talk about constructivism, but actually when students enter, we only tell them to just answer in a conventional way. I think I think especially senior schools, they kill the creativity. In primary school, we still try to teach them using multiple intelligence. I still remember a child who drew a leaf, who colored a leaf brown, was scolded by the teacher. And when the parent asked, why have you scolded my son because of painting the leaf as brown? So she said,
Uh-huh.
no, he should have painted as green. So the child said, but I drew a dry leaf, so which was supposed to be brown. so
Very good. Very good.
so I will request all the participants to type their questions in the question and answer box. Until then, Professor Hariharan, I have some questions which some students and educators they told us when they were registering. So, interestingly, one question I have got from Pakistan, from Mr. Gulshan, who is an educator and a principal and a counselor also. He is asking that what is the role of art with technology in teaching and learning process? Although your whole presentation was catering to that, if you would like to add something. Also,
Yeah.
I would like to add one more question to it because both the questions are quite similar. So maybe both of them can be answered in one go. The second question is from Dr. Gunisati Srinivasalu, an educator from Andhra Pradesh. And he's asking how best we can integrate art, technology, and media in the field of education for students without causing much negative impact. So
Yeah.
I think you beautifully answered all, but still, if you would like to throw.
I'll throw some new light on this. You see, another student has asked, is there any special role, responsibility of students of arts humanities when it comes to making, understanding art? So if I combine all this, what is most important for me when, as an artist, I've been a filmmaking artist all my life, is a word called synesthesia. Synesthesia means when I synchronize all my aesthetic sensibilities into one unit, which means if I am taught physics, can I can I just not hear? Can I also see music in physics? Can I also touch it? Can I also taste it? So, for example, one of the questions I ask students is, can you taste the color red and tell me what do you feel? And they are puzzled. How do you taste color? Well, yes, that is possible. So, the role of an artist is to become a great synesthetist. Combine all the sensory. Then after the five senses, you got to move to the sixth dimension. That means your mind. Can your mind understand your own mind? So I'm not taking it to that level first, but I'm first telling that in my class, when I run a course called Creative Expression. So as a simple example for all of you, what I do is I play them a piece of music. For example, I play them Mozart. Okay, Mozart's Turkish March, and I play them for about 5 minutes. Give them color paper, and I say, draw. Listen to this and draw something. And I said, don't start creating logical patterns here. And you should see the kind of drawings they come up with. Every student comes up with a different drawing. And I have seen students feeling thrilled. He said, we have never ever imagined that we could convert a piece of music into a piece of painting. Then afterwards, what I show them, I said, look, we are not the first people to do that. I said, you go back to the miniature arts of India. Those are miniature paintings, and you can see Rag Bhairavi, Rag Hindol, Rag Malkauns. They're already been done. Beautiful paintings are there, miniature paintings, which actually describe the ragas. So I think that is the first thing. First, art should help us bring all our senses together. And once our bodily, we start engaging with our subject, whether it's history or science, then we understand it better. Now, to technology, It doesn't mean technology, machine learning. How do I tell this computer to teach me better? How do I give in certain directions into this computer so that the computer also starts making some formulation and giving it back to me? So there is something called man-machine learning. For example, you have a mobile phone, and inside that mobile phone, you type something, and it tells you, do you want this direction, or this direction? It is giving you options. This is where did this computer learn this from? You gave it, and it is teaching you back. And now I say, no, I don't want. Give me this direction, and it goes and finds that direction. So this, in a very simple way, is man-machine learning. So I think technology we should think of not merely using projector and air-conditioned room and laptop and PowerPoint presentation, but that is necessary. But now we should go into the next realm. Next realm. And there I feel the role of a teacher should not be one of merely delivering X amount of information. See, in curriculum, this has got this subject, this has to be covered in these 12 weeks, and I'm covering it. You know what I call that? I think of myself as a Swiggy boy. I'm not a Swiggy boy, who's coming to deliver some packets of masala dosa to you, in the classroom. I should be doing something more than that. The masala dosa is something which you eat for breakfast and come to the classroom. But what I should be doing is actually study food, how food affects environment, how environment affects politics, how politics affects psychology, how psychology affects filmmaking. That interwovenness, that is what a classroom should be. A classroom should not be a place where you come to it and then you get blah, 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 90 minutes of information and you go out. That's not that's not what a classroom is meant for. It should be for developing robust knowledge systems. So there is a question that has come up here. Industry is developing a lot of new tools on national and international level being used in classroom. How do we select these tools and software? So yes, there are tools and software are important. I do agree I am completely. Now, there is a whole range of software. But the point is, why are we wanting these tools and software? Why are we wanting this? And what is the larger vision that we have? If we do not have a vision and we just say, oh, this is being done in Harvard, so I should be doing it here. No, that's not the way to approach it. What is the vision that we have? According to that vision, you should move. For example, let me tell you something. At this moment, as we are talking, there is a college that is developed in America called the Minerva Education System. The Minerva University runs out of one room in New York somewhere. But what it does is, it picks up 200 students and sends 10 of them to Shanghai, 10 of them to Argentina, 10 of them to Rio de Janeiro, 10 of them to Berlin, 10 of them to Calcutta. And these 200 students are spread over 20 different locations, and they are all communicating with each other and professors. And what this boy or girl sitting in Calcutta is doing, she could be from Argentina, and she is now in Calcutta. She contextualizes all her learning on the city of Calcutta. Suddenly, Calcutta becomes a laboratory for her. The city is a lab. Imagine, she sees how economics is being taught to her by a professor, and she goes, checks out how economics in Calcutta functions. How do that fellow survive selling golgappas? How does this guy survive driving buses and auto rickshaws? Now, that is what is modern education all about, where a student is pushed into this world to learn in real time, real space. Now, Minerva Education has got about, they finished their first set of graduates have come about, very successfully done. So thing is that we got to reorient. The tools and software is not just meant for a classroom. Now the time has come to think beyond the classroom. And look, this COVID-19 had to teach us how to get beyond the classroom. That all my students today are going through online classes. Did we have to come to COVID-19 to go to online classes? I think we should have done this long ago. We should have done this because that should be just happening like a normal thing. When you meet a professor, a teacher, it should be for some scholarly exchange, not just to know when did Akbar die, or when did the 1857 mutiny happen. That you can pick up anywhere. The point is, a classroom should be robust mentoring spaces where you mentor yourself to achieve your goal, your objective, and your passion. You should be passionate about something. If you're not passionate about something, don't go to university. don't go to university. Just be at home. I'm sure jobs will come seeking to you. Do not worry. So that's what is my advice. You are muted yourself.
I am saying that in today's world, I totally agree with you. In today's world, education is mostly uh, the objective. When you were talking about the objective in a student mind remains the assessment only. You know, that how much I'm going to score, you know, at the
Yes,
end of
yes.
the exam. And I think we need to change that kind of perspective of the student. And to change the perspective of the student, we as educators, we need to change our perspectives where we are teaching different pedagogy altogether, you know, in the classes. So let's move on to the next question, sir. So person is asking, how do you think new technology will affect people's learning patterns?
Yeah. So what is learning for me? First of all, I believe that there is something called learning to learn. Because my strong belief is that if after all that learning, you don't remember anything, you are not able to contextualize anything, then that learning is of no use. So first of all, we should learn to learn. And that's a rather complicated thing. So it requires three things. It requires IQ, it requires EQ, emotional quotient, and it is, I call it, the third one is called TQ, teaching quotient, which means, you know, I honestly tell you, when I was in college, I learned best when I did group study. So there will be one kid, who will be so passionate about whatever she or he is doing because they discovered something and they would tell her. That is teaching quotient. That teaching quotient, when you bring in a certain emotional connection into the story, you make it a story. And once you make a story out of anything, I think it's easy to deliver retention power. So one of my standard quotes is that, how come we forgot Akbar's death date, but we remember Baba Black Sheep? We, we never actually studied Baba Black Sheep. We never read it as a paper. But we can never forget it because it was taught with a wonderful teaching quotient. That teacher danced with us, she sang with us, and we all swayed together, and we remember it. So, how can I teach Baba physics like Baba Black Sheep? How can I teach chemistry like Baba Black Sheep? That should be the goal of all teaching. Learning is about retention, and retention in very, very passionate and subjective ways. Everybody cannot retain everything. But when you retain something, it must be very passionately attached to you. That's what I feel.
Yeah, and I think that makes me think that as you talked about TQ, that the teaching quotient, I think we should look into the learning quotient also. As you brought about a very pertinent question that, actually we don't teach kids, how to learn. Only we tell them what is the curriculum and the syllabus of the entrance exam and for the final assessment, but nobody tells them how to learn. So I think it's important for them to know their learning style also, along with their IQ and EQ, and technology is there to support those learning styles.
Very true. Very
So
true.
that's fantastic. And one
Yes.
question I would like to ask Professor Hariharan after all this, that do you think that this technology, in fact, there is one question, and I should read out that question similar to that. Um, he says that Siddharth from Uti, he says people say technology is spoiling our lives, making us lazy, and technology is reducing our lifespan. I'm totally against it. And I say technology is the new tomorrow. So he wants to know your take, your viewpoint on this. And
Yes.
related to this, one question is coming to my mind. Uh, you know, earlier, initially, when we used to go to schools and we used to learn, then a lot of things we used to do mentally. So mental maths, mental learning was given a lot of emphasis. And right now, when I look at the system, like if I talk about the CBSE system or any other system, for certain papers or certain things, they will allow the calculator to be there. And we say that everything, as you correctly said, the whole world has been in our mobile system. Now, everything is available. All the information is available at one click. So do you think
Yes.
that it's going to influence the memory power, if I can term it as, of any
Yes.
student?
Yes. A very good question. You see, the thing is that technology, the more technology you get, better is you way to move forward. Okay, the technology enables you to move, but if you are stuck with that technology, for example, when did the first book come into being? Only in the 14th century, late 15th century. The first book with the Gutenberg press. Till then, you had to go to the professor's house to read his manuscripts. Once the book came, everybody could get the book and you could read. Okay, now could you say that the original handwriting got killed because of this book? The book was important. The book was important for us to bring us up till here. Now, the book is available in a simple PDF, on a system. I don't have to buy books anymore. These books, all that I have behind, shows me how old I am. I will need just one hard disk today. So that technology is very, very important. But we should not confuse information with knowledge. See, knowledge is something else altogether. That is something you need to construct. It is not available. So, for example, you are getting data every day. So many people of cases have been found of COVID. So many people are. But how do you take all this data and create a knowledge system out of it? Because what is happening is today there are multiple information pieces coming in. Most of them are fake. So we get so much of fake news. The only way to somehow, sift the fake news out is by being knowledgeable yourself. And you should know, hey, this is a piece of fake news. It cannot be possible. But that is possible to say only if you are knowledgeable. So for me, the drive is towards knowledge. How does universities create knowledgeable students, intelligent students, not informed students? You get me the difference? We have to move out of information into knowledge. So good. Why do I have to memorize all the multiplication tables? I don't need to. I don't need to. But I need to now seek more into the world of environment. For example, I'm seeing deforestation happening in Borneo. How am I going to see the square mile spatial intelligence? If all these forests are being cut to create a new capital, do you know the capital called Jakarta of Indonesia is sinking into the sea? They are urgently shifting that capital to some other place. For me, that is more important. How am I going to provide solutions to those hundreds and hundreds of wonderful wildlife that is going to be decimated if this capital comes up? So that is knowledge. Knowledge will help me there. And we need to get that knowledge in order to save society today. Information is always available. Anybody can pick up information. So I don't mind, feeling the fact that, oh, nobody knows multiplication tables today. And so what if you don't know? The point is, can you do something to save those forests? For me, those are urgent matters. And for that, you have to be emotionally tied in to do that.
I think that makes it very, very important to develop that kind of empathy among students, so that they're sensitive towards the needs of the others. Because generally we see that we are always thinking in terms of what my society has given to me, what my university, my country has given to me. So I think we have to initiate this, and we have to encourage students and the youth, to think that what you have given back, in which way. And I was listening to you, I was just thinking, because now it's been so many years in this industry. Earlier, when we used to say applied questions or applied knowledge or apply information, at the most, people used to think of, okay, if you know the concept of, say, the Newton's law, if you know, then you should know how to apply it in terms of numericals, right? So application was limited to only that. So I think it's the need of the hour that we should know how to apply in the real life situation.
Yes, absolutely.
I think that's extremely important.
And how to harness the powers of new technology. The new technology for me is artificial intelligence and man-machine learning. How do I going to grapple with that and do something? How, when the computers came to India in the 90s, how it revolutionized everything. It revolutionized, and we did not become lesser because of the computer. We actually became more advanced. So we should learn to embrace the next industry and move forward in very, very robust ways. Instead of saying, oh, that's going to kill people. No, I think it will help us much more.
Yes, I totally agree. And let's move on to the next question. And in fact, before I move on to the next question, having said that and what you were saying, I will just take it forward. When you were talking about transcreation and transformation, and one more term you used, translation.
Translation.
So
Yes.
I think I would like to hear you on that, because what I feel that many a times students, don't express their curiosity also.
Mhm.
There's a lot of fear is attached. One is that if I ask this particular question, or if I want to find out this particular thing, so I don't know whether my research or my curiosity to know this particular concept is right or wrong. There is a fear of being rejected by the group, by the society. So sometimes they don't even want to try anything new. So any kind of encouraging thoughts for those kind of students?
Yes. So, for example, if you have how I look at very simple people, I don't look at great PhD scholars and achievers. I see very ordinary people. Let's take somebody very ordinary person, like say a film actor who comes into cinema. Let's take a man called Rajinikanth or Kamal Hassan. These people have hardly gone to schools. They never went to school. They never did education. But what they did was actually watch society, watch their audiences, watch their films, absorbed everything around them, and created something new. A new kind of message, a new kind of social understanding they created. They may not be able to come up to the stage and talk like me and explain what they did. But I think the important is to go into getting into what I see as immersive. You need to immerse yourself. Once you immerse yourself into that reality, you understand it better. But if you distance yourself and say, I'm going to study it so that I get 4.7 GPA, that means you are not immersed in your education. You are moved out of it just to see one certificate at the end of the day and say, with this, I'm going to become an engineer. So why am I saying this with certain things, with certain passion? I have been watching a lot of IIT graduates who have been coming out over the last, you know, 15 years, at least 15 years. And I find that most of the students who do mechanical engineering in IIT, and they get to very high scores, they go inside. But when they come out, I find that most of them go and join software companies. They join banks. They join TCS. They join Infosys. So I asked the director, what is this? You taught them mechanical engineering and they become computer guys. What is this happening? I asked the companies themselves, Cognizant, I said, why do you take all these mechanical engineers? And he says, well, they've got analytical skills. That is learning. See, those kids have learned it on their own, how to analyze, how to take, that is transcreation. You take that aspect of analysis, which is there in mechanical engineering, repurpose it and put it into finance, repurpose it, put it into legal, repurpose it, put it into medical documentation. That is learning. And because of survival, they did it. But I am trying to say, how can we as faculty help them to do that from the beginning? Why should that boy waste 4 years? And then, when I was running the film academy, Prasad, LV Prasad Film Academy, I would get students who have done their MTech in chemical engineering, and they will want to come to me and say, I'm doing film direction. Then why did you do MTech to come to? Oh, I did that MTech because my father wanted me to do. But now I want to do film direction. So I want to say, why doesn't IIT help that student become a film director from day one? Because film direction does not mean to say action and cut. It means a global understanding, a holistic understanding, an interwoven learning. So I suggest that universities should not narrow focus the student. They should tell the student, you do whatever you want. Whatever you are passionate about, you learn it. But learn it with the purpose of expanding the horizons of your knowledge. You don't narrow focus it. And the university will be doing a great disservice if they narrow focus it. If they say, okay, you want to learn physics, we will just teach you physics and you go out. That would be a criminal waste of talent, time, resources. That is what technology, people, all the Gardner's theories of intelligence are all supposed to help that. That is what they're supposed to help. So translation, transformation, and transcreation. See, that transcreation is a fabulous thing. How do you take it to another realm? That boy who learned mechanical engineering and ended up becoming a software engineer, that is transcreation, not translation and not transformation, but transcreation. How do I take some element of knowledge which I pick up in one domain and bring it to another domain somewhere else? That is transcreation. So I see examples of transcreation everywhere, everywhere. The point is the university should pick up those examples and say, take it. If you read Einstein, he has clearly said that if I had not learned music, I would have never been a physicist. The director of BARC, Raja Ramanna, for example, was a fabulous pianist. Homi Baba, who founded BARC, was also a very good pianist. So these are people who are very talented people in the world of arts. But they did not become that art. They became something else. But they were able to use that art, their creative energies, to spell out their anxieties, spell out their desires, spell out their determination, spell out their motives in very, very clear ways. I think that's what a university should be. Tap the potential of the student and make that student better and the best. That should be the goal of every university.
Professor Hariharan, as you are a part of film industry, so one question is coming back to me that what do you think, what is the role of film industry, or how can the film industry impact and revolutionize the education system of today? So whatever changes you're suggesting, do you think that the film industry can take up some initiative in bringing out these?
Yes. I tell you, this is a very, 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 very important question. And it should have been addressed by intelligent people like all of us, like my parents, the whole generation, very early. Which means I have gone and, shouted my voice hoarse at all the education systems that please introduce film studies in school. You see, people, this film industry cannot, they are not like magicians, who can come and change. There must be a world enough to receive it. So film studies is very, very important. How to study cinema, just like the way theater is studied, like the way Shakespeare's plays are studied. Why don't we study films like that? So that from the young age, people start watching films with a critical eye, with critical thinking. So once you know that the audiences are already critical thinkers, the film industry will also address them. See, the film industry is addressing a set of audiences who are endowed with certain kinds of intelligences. I'm not saying yes, lower or higher. But yes, what you have said is the film industry has a very, very important role to play. Very important role to play, provided the society has been empowered, enabled to be capable of receiving new thoughts from cinema. You see, cinema's new thoughts cannot be just happening in vacuum. I must be also able to receive it. For example, if Satyajit Ray, could have been taught in schools, I'm sure everybody would be looking at realistic films in very different ways. But nobody taught us schools. Nobody taught us films, cinema as a subject in schools. It's so. I have gone to IITs and I've shouted at directors, why don't you introduce film technology as a course in IIT? So they say, oh, film technology means direction, sound recording. I said, no, not at all true. Film technology means how to build good cinema theaters with good acoustics, good projectors, good sound systems, because all those aesthetics are very important. So let me kind of give you a new idea here. What is the meaning of aesthetics? I always ask, should the aesthetics say something pleasing, something beautiful? I said no. My very simple advice to all of you is that whenever somebody asks you a question of what is this, you should immediately ask, what is it not? If I ask you what is aesthetic, you should immediately ask yourself, what is not aesthetic? So what is the word for not aesthetic? The word is anesthetic. And what does anesthesia do? It dumbs your senses. Therefore, what does aesthetics do? It brings your senses alive. That is the beautiful. That is so beautiful. That which brings your senses alive. It could be poverty. It could be garbage. If you look at garbage and if it is not bringing your senses alive to say, who put this garbage here, then you are an anesthetic person. You have been anesthetized to the world. So the job of a university is to make you aesthetic, aesthetically responsive to the world. Everything, the sound, the smell, the touch, the hearing, visual, everything should be appealing to you. And appealing not pleasingly. It could appeal to you even angrily. And you should respond to protests on the street. They are not aesthetic, but they are important to understand. Important to listen. गालियां दे रहे हैं, चिल्ला रहे हैं, चलो सुनो उनको, क्या बात है? So all that is very important. The aesthetics is very important. And every student must come out as an aesthetic citizen when she or he comes out of a university and not an aesthetic.
Beautifully explained, Professor Hariharan, and that makes me thinking that I am going to enroll myself in your classes now.
Thank you.
So one, I think, last question now. Very important, looking at today's scenario and whatever is happening around us nowadays. One question is from Vidya Prabhakaran from Chennai. She is asking, how can social media platforms be utilized to establish and develop one's social profile and validity? And in this regard, I would like you to throw some light on the kind of responsible behavior our youth should show, while they are on social media.
Yeah. I know it's very complicated subject, because social media platforms are meant both to construct and to disrupt. They do both. And I think even prior to the social media, when there was print media was doing the same thing. It was constructing and they were also disrupting. I only believe that if every student, if every citizen becomes conscious of the larger visions of the nation, larger visions of our society, and that is possible only with proper correspondence with fact, real correspondence, not at the moment this virtual correspondence that is happening. For example, I could speak from a cellular phone somewhere and I can lie to you, telling, oh, I am very busy in a meeting, actually you are just sitting doing nothing. I can tell you lies. So the cellular phone has actually enabled me to tell lies. Whereas if I was actually sitting and holding in the old phone in my home, and if I pick up a home phone, I cannot tell a lie that I am in a cinema theater now, because it is connected into your house. How did this go to the cinema theater? So yes, so every advancement in technology will actually give you both advantages and disadvantages. But the point is, the social media platform enables you to connect with so many people. Automatically your responsibility goes. I have a feeling, let me also be, I'm also watching several, most of them are very creative, very constructive. There are a few bad elements who are coming into the social platform to disrupt it. I think a sensible citizen will know which is a disruptive message and which is not a disruptive message. That little sensitivity is required, and I'm sure this problem will be solved. I hope I have answered the question.
Yes, definitely. So I think that's what I was looking at time. I think we can go with one more question if you allow me.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
So this question is asked by Arjun Raina from Mumbai. Are human progressing towards a technological paradise, or regressing towards an ecological disaster?
Well, I would believe that we are all at the moment in the state of evolution. We are evolving towards becoming, embracing technology like as another part of our ego. Like the cell phone has become part of me now. It is, I cannot live without it. That doesn't mean I'm a slave of the cell phone. I should know how to befriend the cellular phone. I should know how to befriend the virtual reality. I should learn how to befriend television. I think if you have seen history going so far, we have always been progressing. I don't think regressing is very difficult unless something monstrous happens. We will only be progressing towards a technological paradise where we will take advantage of technology. For example, look at a little thing like Alexa, Amazon Alexa. Now I can forget. I don't have to remember where I kept the keys. Where is the switch? Where is that? I can just come and, Alexa, start my car, and the car starts. You go and sit inside the car and say, car, take me to my university, and the car takes you to university. This is great, because now your mind is opened up to do more things other than just remember where you kept your keys and where is the direction to your university. Let that be done by technology. You think of more creative things now. You see, so we should embrace a battery-less car, fuel-less car, a new battery-driven car, a battery-driven car which has a GPS in it. It can take you wherever you want. Car, it can be a bus, it can be an aircraft, anything. But let the human mind start thinking about more than just retaining information, but moving towards knowledge and aesthetic systems. And it can only go higher. I don't think we can go backward. I'm a complete optimist. And therefore, I make a joke about myself that my blood group is also called B positive. So I am always positive. I think mankind can only progress. It's very difficult to regress.
Thank you so much, Professor Hariharan. And I can see a lot of questions and answers. I don't know, is not we cannot answer all the questions, but yes, one interesting comment I would like to read, where somebody is saying, Mr. Hariharan, I feel you're reading my mind. So I think all the questions of many people are being answered, are already answered. And I hope we have taken all the questions. I can't see any more questions now. Some students are typing questions related to Kriya University. So I will request them that they can send a mail to ask@kriya.edu.in.
Yes.
And we will answer all your queries there. And it's a wonderful, wonderful interaction, Professor Hariharan. And I'm going to keep my promise. I'm going to attend your classes once I'm at Kriya campus. And I feel that, one very important point which you have brought about, which I would like to say to all the students who are watching this, that be a self-learner. Today is the time of being a self-learner. And I think this pandemic situation has also taught us to be a self-learner. Many times, we keep blaming the environmental factors. The teachers are not good, the education system is not good.
Absolutely.
Education system has killed my creativity. So what do I do? Stephen Covey has very rightly said that be proactive and not reactive. So proactive people, they just evaluate the situation and they move on. They move on. They learn new skills and they move on. Reactive people, they complain. If you look around, you will find some or the other excuse for everything. So it is totally up to you, as Professor Hariharan has rightly said. Just be positive, and you will see that if you are aesthetic enough, you will see the beauty in every part of whatever is happening in your life, and you will see that that gives you extra energy, not only for yourself, but you will give that energy to others as well. Thank you so much, Professor Hariharan, for spending so much of time. Interesting conversation. I don't want to stop here. Actually, we have a time limit. And thanks to all the participants for being acting so responsibly on the chat and asking such relevant questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.